In the autumn of 2023, Ranger Marcus Jenkins was inspecting an abandoned firebreak in the northern reaches of Great Smoky Mountains National Park when his attention was drawn upward. High in the crown of a towering chestnut oak, something hung where nothing should have been. From the ground, it resembled a crude effigy, like a scarecrow left behind by time. A human outline, fixed among the branches nearly 20 feet above the forest floor. The figure's arms were stretched outward, lashed to side limbs with thick cord. The legs hung slack, and the head drooped forward in a posture that echoed execution rather than accident. Jenkins froze, then raised his binoculars. What came into focus forced him to radio for assistance at once. This was no mannequin, no bundle of cloth. It was a human skeleton, bleached bone wrapped in tatters of fabric, suspended by a deliberate lattice of rope and wire. Something resembling a hood covered the skull. The arm bones had been positioned to form a cruciform shape, ribs exposed beneath shredded clothing. For 33 years, these remains had been displayed in the tree, less than 4 meters from a hiking path. For 33 years, wind had rocked them, rain had stripped them, summer heat had baked them, and winter snow had buried them. And for all that time, no one noticed, because the tree stood in a forgotten pocket of forest, a place rarely entered. The bones belonged to Emily Carter, 26 years old, from Chicago. She vanished on October 7, 1990, while hiking alone on the Ramsey Cascades Trail in the eastern section of the park. Her disappearance remained unresolved for more than 3 decades. Her parents passed away never learning the truth of her fate. Emily arrived at the park on October 3, 1990. She traveled solo in a rented Jeep Cherokee, which she left near the Gatlinburg Visitor Center in Tennessee. It was her first journey into the Appalachian Mountains. Before this trip, she had spent 3 years working as a manager at an advertising firm in Chicago. She took a 2-week break seeking silence, distance, and the grounding presence of nature. In a letter to her friend Laura Simmons, Emily wrote that she was no novice outdoors. During college, she belonged to a hiking club, trekked through Colorado's mountains, and explored Wisconsin forests on weekends. She understood the rules: tell someone your plan, carry enough water, remain on marked trails. Yet this time, those rules did not protect her. On October 4 and 5, Emily chose easy, well-traveled routes, Laurel Falls and Alum Cave. She stayed at Elkmont Campground, signed in each evening, and spoke with fellow hikers. The campground manager, Robert Hayes, later described her as gentle and reserved, someone who delighted in photographing birds. On October 6, Emily met David Morrison, a 32-year-old wildlife photographer from Asheville, North Carolina. They talked beside the campfire. He spoke of bears he had tracked and quiet places to spot deer. Emily unfolded her map and asked which trail would suit a full-day hike. Morrison recommended Ramsey Cascades, an 8-mile round trip through old-growth forest, ending at a 100-foot waterfall. He told her it was moderately challenging, with nearly 2,000 feet of elevation gain and a 5 to 6 hour duration. He warned her that October days were short and urged an early start. The next morning, October 7, at 7 a.m., Emily left the campground. Hayes watched her load her pack. She wore a blue windbreaker, black hiking pants, and a gray cap. Inside her backpack were water, sandwiches, a rain jacket, a flashlight, a map, and a Canon AE-1 camera. At 8:30 a.m., she parked at the Ramsey Cascades trailhead in the Greenbrier area. A couple from Atlanta, James and Susan Collins, saw her step out of the vehicle. Susan later recalled Emily smiling and saying, "It's a beautiful morning for a hike." Those words marked the last time anyone heard her voice. James asked if she was hiking alone. Emily said yes, explaining the trail was manageable and that she expected to return by 3 p.m. They invited her to join them, but she declined politely, saying she preferred to walk at her own rhythm. At 9 a.m., Ranger Thomas Wilson drove past the Greenbrier lot and noticed Emily's car. It blended in, there were always several vehicles there on weekends. Around 1 p.m., 2 hikers from Nashville, Michael and Jennifer Rogers, were descending from Ramsey Falls when they encountered a man in his mid-30s. He wore a camouflage jacket and a black cap and moved fast downhill, nearly running, eyes fixed on the ground. When they greeted him, he gave a brief nod without slowing. Michael noticed a large olive-colored pack and a fresh cut on the man's right hand, blood visible. Jennifer asked if he was all right. He muttered that he'd slipped and kept walking. The couple continued on, giving the moment no further thought. By 3 p.m., Emily had not returned. Her Jeep remained in the lot at 5 p.m., still unmoved as dusk fell. At 7 p.m., parking attendant Kevin Bradley finally took notice. The Cherokee was still there. He looked inside. It was empty. The attendant contacted the ranger station and reported that something was wrong. Ranger Thomas Wilson reached the parking area around 7:30 p.m. He swept the lot with his flashlight, aimed the beam toward the trailhead, and called Emily's name into the dark more than once. The forest gave no answer. Wilson radioed dispatch and requested that a search be initiated. By 9 p.m., 4 rangers entered the Ramsey Cascades Trail, carrying radios and lights. They hiked the 4 miles to the waterfall, scanned the ground and surrounding woods, and called out at intervals. No sign of Emily appeared. At midnight, the effort was paused until daylight. At first light on October 8, the search expanded into a full operation. 23 park rangers, 15 local rescue volunteers, 2 tracking dogs, and a helicopter were deployed. The focus centered on the Ramsey Cascades Trail and the forest within a 2-mile perimeter. Near midday, the dogs picked up a scent. They followed it uphill to a junction around 4,000 feet in elevation, where an old, forgotten fire road split away from the main path. The road did not appear on visitor maps, but it could still be traced on the ground, an overgrown scar once used by Forest Service vehicles. The dogs followed this route for roughly 300 yards, then stopped cold. The trail vanished. Handler Jason Reeves explained that such an ending often suggested a vehicle pickup or forced removal. Yet no cars could have accessed the road. It had been sealed with chains and gates since 1987. Rangers spread out, probing the nearby forest. They checked ravines, creek beds, and jagged rock formations. Nothing surfaced. By nightfall on October 8, the search zone had grown to 5 square miles. A helicopter equipped with thermal imaging flew overhead, but the thick canopy swallowed any heat signatures below. On October 9, Sevier County authorities notified Emily's employer in Chicago and contacted her parents. Robert and Susan Carter arrived in Gatlinburg the following day. Emily's father told Detective Mark Holloway that his daughter knew the outdoors too well to simply wander off. Her mother added that Emily was methodical, careful, and never careless with planning. On October 11, Holloway began interviewing everyone known to have been in the park on October 7. James and Susan Collins confirmed seeing Emily at the trailhead that morning. Michael and Jennifer Rogers described their encounter with a fast-moving stranger in camouflage. Holloway asked them to be precise. Michael recalled a white male, roughly 35 to 40 years old, slender, about 6 feet tall. Dark hair beneath a plain black cap. Light stubble. A camouflage jacket that looked military. A large olive-green hiking pack. And on his right hand, a fresh cut, blood running down toward the wrist. Investigators questioned parking attendants in the Greenbrier area. Kevin Bradley, who worked that evening, remembered multiple vehicles but no one in camouflage. There were no surveillance cameras in the lots. On October 12, police reviewed records of frequent park visitors, licensed hunters, and local recluses. 3 men matched the general description. Howard Mitchell, 42, a Vietnam veteran living in a trailer 10 miles from the park. Clarence Wade, 37, a hunter with prior arrests for poaching. And Ray Dawson, 39, a former ranger dismissed for protocol violations. All were questioned. Each account checked out. Mitchell had medical records placing him in Knoxville that morning. Wade worked a full shift at a Sevierville car wash. Dawson was visiting his mother, confirmed by neighbors. On October 13, the search resumed with renewed intensity. Drones were brought in. The Ramsey Cascades Trail was rechecked repeatedly. Side gullies were stripped bare. Caves and rock shelters were inspected. More volunteers arrived. Nearly 80 people formed search lines, moving slowly and deliberately through the forest. By October 15, nothing tied to Emily had been found. Rangers recovered an old boot, a sock, and a plastic bottle, but none belonged to her. The forest remained silent, and the trail yielded no answers. On October 16, officials formally ended the search. At a press briefing, Chief Ranger Daniel Carter stated that every available resource had been exhausted. More than 15 square miles had been covered. Trails were walked, streams traced, cliffs inspected, and hazardous zones searched. There was no longer any realistic hope of finding Emily Carter alive. Her parents rejected that conclusion. Refusing to surrender to silence, Robert Carter hired a private search group from Asheville. On October 22, 6 investigators returned to the area with tracking dogs. This time, something surfaced. At the point where the abandoned fire road faded into forest, a single truck tire impression was found pressed into the soil. The team documented it and turned the evidence over to law enforcement. Tire analyst William Harris examined the photograph. He identified the tread as belonging to a BF Goodrich all-terrain T/A, commonly used on pickup trucks and SUVs throughout the region. The mark had been softened by rain, yet Harris estimated it was only 3 to 5 days old. That placed it dangerously close to the day Emily vanished. Detective Holloway widened the scope of the investigation. He began reviewing records of truck and SUV owners within a 50-mile radius. The list was overwhelming, over 2,000 names. He filtered it down to men between 25 and 50 who had criminal histories or displayed unusual behavior. 123 remained. By late November, 57 had been interviewed. None raised enough suspicion to move the case forward. The rest had either relocated or declined to speak without legal counsel. On December 1, 1990, Emily Carter's disappearance was officially reclassified as a cold case. It stayed open in name only. Active searches ceased. Holloway assured the family he would pursue any new information if it emerged, but there were no promises, only uncertainty. Robert and Susan Carter returned to Chicago in mid-December. They left their phone numbers and addresses with police departments in Tennessee and North Carolina, with park officials, hospitals, and shelters. Once a month, Robert called Detective Holloway. Every call ended the same way. No updates. No progress. In April 1991, a hunter discovered an old backpack deep in the woods, 12 miles from the park. Inside were water-damaged clothes, an empty canteen, and torn fragments of a map. Rangers examined the items. They were not Emily's. That July, another alarm was raised when a hiker found bones in a ravine near the Alum Cave Trail. Police responded. The remains belonged to a deer. In October 1991, exactly 1 year after Emily disappeared, her parents returned to Ramsey Cascades. They held a quiet memorial and placed a wooden cross bearing a plaque, "In memory of Emily Carter, forever in our hearts." The cross stood for 3 months before a winter storm tore it away. Years passed. 5, 10, then 20. Emily's name faded into a growing catalog of unresolved disappearances within national parks. She became a line on a database, a case number on the National Park Service website. Occasionally, true crime forums revisited her story, offering theories: an accident, a wild animal, an abduction, a deliberate vanishing. None brought answers. Robert Carter died of cancer in 2009. Susan followed in 2016 after a stroke. Neither ever learned what became of their daughter. On September 27, 2023, Ranger Marcus Jenkins was assigned to investigate a report of illegal logging in the park's northern sector. Witnesses claimed a truck pulling a trailer had been seen on an old logging road in the Cottonwood area, a restricted zone reserved for service vehicles only. Jenkins set out on his ATV, following a fire trail swallowed by brush and neglect since the late 1990s. He was 34, had served as a ranger for 11 years, and knew the park intimately, yet this section was unfamiliar. There were no trails, no signs, no reason for visitors to be there. About a mile from the main road, he stopped to consult his GPS. When he looked up, something caught his eye. High above him, in a massive chestnut oak nearly 90 feet tall, a dark shape broke the pattern of branches. The trunk was thick, ancient. And about 20 feet off the ground, wedged between the trunk and a heavy limb, a human-shaped figure hung, motionless, waiting, as if the forest itself had been holding its breath for decades. The figure's arms were stretched wide, fastened to 2 neighboring limbs. Below them, the legs dropped straight down, while the head sagged forward in a silent bow. At first, Jenkins assumed it was a crude prop, a scarecrow, perhaps, or a tasteless prank. Teenagers in nearby towns had staged things like that before. But as he stepped closer and raised his binoculars, the illusion collapsed. What he saw was real. A rotting hood clung to the skull, its fabric eaten away to reveal pale bone beneath. Across the chest hung torn scraps of blue material, once likely a jacket. The rib cage jutted outward, exposed. The spine curved unnaturally. The pelvis was held in place by two decayed ropes, while the arms, only bones now, were bound to the branches with a thick climbing rope, its yellow surface darkened by age and moss. The legs swung freely. The feet were gone. At 2 p.m., Jenkins radioed for immediate backup. By 3 o'clock, the clearing filled with responders: Ranger Chief David Thompson, Detective Sarah Collins from the Sevier County Police Department, 2 forensic technicians, and a fire crew equipped with a ladder truck. Recovering the remains was far from simple. Decades-old ropes had bitten deep into the branches, swallowed by new layers of bark. They had to be cut free. By 6 p.m., the body was finally lowered and placed on a tarpaulin. It was the complete skeleton of a woman. Robert Haynes, a forensic technician with 2 decades of experience, stated almost instantly that death had occurred no less than 20 to 30 years earlier. The bones were stripped clean, bleached by sun and rain. Yet fragments of clothing remained: pieces of a blue nylon jacket, remnants of black pants, shreds of cotton underwear. There were no shoes. A fracture was visible at the base of the skull. Later analysis confirmed it had been caused by a powerful blow from a blunt object to the back of the head, near the occipital bone. The force would almost certainly have been fatal. Additional markings told another story: abrasions and scoring on the wrist and ankle bones, consistent with restraints applied while the victim was still alive. On the middle finger of the right hand, one thing endured: a thin silver ring. Engraved inside were the initials EC. Detective Collins photographed it and submitted the image to the missing persons database. 2 hours later, the system returned a match. Emily Carter. Missing since October 1990. The ring was listed in her file, a birthday gift from her mother when she turned 21. DNA testing took 1 week. On October 5, 2023, the results confirmed what the forest had guarded for decades. The remains belonged to Emily Carter. Detective Collins officially reopened the case. She reviewed every report, every interview transcript, every search map from 1990. One detail stood out immediately. The body had been found 4.5 miles from the Ramsey Cascades Trail, well beyond the original search perimeter. It lay deep in untouched woodland, far from marked paths, in a place neither hikers nor rangers had reason to enter. Forensic specialists examined the ropes. They were identified as Blue Water climbing rope, a popular brand in the 1980s and 1990s, 11 mm thick, static load, commonly used by climbers and rescue teams. The knots told their own story. Bowline knots at the wrists. Figure 8 knots securing the branches. These were not improvised bindings. Whoever arranged the body understood climbing systems and load-bearing techniques. 3 feet above the skeleton, investigators found scars in the bark, marks left by metal spikes or hooks. Someone had climbed the tree. The conclusion was unavoidable. The killer had used professional climbing equipment to raise the body and fix it high above the ground. Collins began tracking down former park employees from the early 1990s. Most were retired or gone. Thomas Wilson, who had led the original search, died in 2018. Daniel Carter, the ranger chief at the time, had relocated to Florida. Reached by phone, he recalled little beyond the belief that his team had searched thoroughly. The park, he said, was simply too vast to cover every hidden acre. Collins then contacted Mark Holloway, the detective who handled the case decades earlier. He was 79, living in a nursing home in Knoxville. His memory was fragile, but certain fragments remained intact. Holloway said he had always suspected the man in camouflage seen by the Rogerses on the trail. He had never managed to identify him. Before the call ended, he asked only one thing: to be informed when the killer was finally named. Detective Collins opened the old suspect list from 1991 and began again, as if time itself had circled back, waiting for the truth to be spoken aloud. Howard Mitchell had died years earlier, in 2005, from liver cirrhosis. Clarence Wade was no longer free, serving a sentence in a Tennessee prison for armed robbery. That left Ray Dawson, the former ranger, still alive. He was living in Maryville and working quietly at a camping supply store. On October 14, Detectives Sarah Collins and Jason Turner went to see him. Dawson was 72. His face looked worn, his body fragile, as if time itself had been heavy on him. He lived alone in a modest house on the edge of town. When Emily Carter's name was mentioned, he nodded. He remembered the disappearance. He hadn't been employed by the park at the time, but he said he followed the story closely when it happened. Collins asked direct questions. Did he own a pickup or SUV in 1991? Dawson said yes, a Ford Ranger. Tires? He couldn't recall. Was he in the park on October 7 that year? Possibly. He wasn't certain. 30 years blurred memories into shadows. Could he climb trees? Yes. Rangers were trained in rope work and high-angle rescue. He had used climbing gear many times. When the detectives asked to search his home and garage, Dawson agreed. No lawyer. Inside, they found old equipment packed away in boxes, ropes, carabiners, harnesses, belay devices. The ropes were Sterling brand, not Blue Water. That alone meant nothing. Gear changes over decades. When Collins suggested a voluntary polygraph, Dawson declined. Calmly. He said he wasn't obligated to prove innocence. There was no basis for arrest. No warrant. No physical link. Financial records from 1991 showed nothing unusual. His Ford Ranger had been sold in 1994, and the vehicle had long since been scrapped. Any chance of matching tire treads was gone. Collins returned again to the original list of pickup and SUV owners from the early investigation. Of the 123 men, 47 were dead. 31 had moved out of state. The remaining individuals were re-interviewed. No one confessed. No new information surfaced. By October 30, 2023, the investigation stalled. They had a victim. They had a crime scene. They had a window of time. But they had no killer, no DNA, no living witnesses. The only thread left was the man in camouflage seen on the trail more than 3 decades earlier. But even that memory had eroded. Michael Rogers had died in 2017. Jennifer Rogers lived in California and could recall almost nothing beyond fragments. A forensic artist created a composite based on the old description: a vague face, dark hair, stubble, a cap, a camouflage jacket. The image could have belonged to thousands of men across Tennessee. The sketch ran in local papers. No one responded. In November, forensic teams returned to the oak tree. They searched the surrounding forest within a 100-yard radius, hoping time had missed something. They found rusted beer cans, traces of an old fire ring, and a spent .22 caliber shell casing. None of it could be dated. None of it could be tied to Emily. Too many years. Too many hands passing through the land. 6 feet up the trunk, investigators noticed a carved symbol, a cross-like shape with 2 horizontal lines. For a moment, it seemed deliberate. A marker. A signature. But analysis revealed it predated the crime by decades. It was an old logging symbol, meaningless to the case. Collins escalated the search. She contacted the FBI and requested a review of serial offenders active in the southeastern United States during the late 1980s and early 1990s. 3 names surfaced. William Shaw Green, responsible for 4 murders of female tourists in Kentucky. Derek Thomas, a kidnapper operating in Georgia and Alabama. Kevin Lee Hunter, who targeted lone women traveling through Appalachia. Each was ruled out. Green had been imprisoned for life since 1993. Thomas was executed in 2007. Hunter died of an overdose in 1999. Records confirmed none were in Tennessee during the period of Emily's disappearance. In December 2023, the case was formally classified as an unsolved homicide. A press conference was held in Knoxville. Standing before the cameras, Detective Collins spoke with certainty but without closure. "We know Emily Carter was murdered," she said. And with that, the truth stood revealed, but the hand that shaped it remained hidden, leaving the forest to keep its final secret. "We know her body was displayed in a tree, posed like a scarecrow, like a prize," Detective Collins said. "We still don't know who did it. If anyone remembers a man wearing a camouflage jacket on the Ramsey Cascades Trail on October 7, 1990, we ask you to contact law enforcement." The story spread quickly. Headlines echoed across newspapers and screens: "Hiker found hanging after 33 years. Skeleton discovered in National Park. The Scarecrow mystery of the Smoky Mountains." The case ignited discussion everywhere: true crime forums, podcasts devoted to cold cases, YouTube channels searching for forgotten truths. Speculation multiplied. Some believed the killer was a local, someone who knew the park's hidden veins and forgotten roads. Others suggested a passing tourist, a stranger whose path crossed Emily's only once. A darker interpretation surfaced as well. Some argued the act was symbolic, ritualistic. Psychologist Janet Wilson, who advised investigators, explained that suspending the body in such a manner reflected a need for absolute control. Hanging the victim high above the ground turned her into part of the landscape itself. Not merely a murder, but a display. A warning. A permanent marker of dominance. In her view, it pointed toward a sadistic personality driven by power and possession. In January 2024, police received an anonymous tip claiming another human figure had been spotted hanging from a tree near Sevierville. Rangers rushed to investigate. The discovery turned out to be harmless, an old scarecrow hung by a farmer to keep birds away. The forest exhaled. Another dead end. A month later, a letter arrived on Detective Collins's desk. It was written by a woman named Linda Harris. She recalled that in October 1991, her brother James had returned from a trip to the Smoky Mountains with a scratch on his arm and an unsettling silence about him. When she asked what happened, he brushed it off. "I fell," he said. At the time, she thought nothing of it. But decades later, with Emily Carter's story resurfacing, the memory refused to stay quiet. Collins followed the lead. James Harris, now 61, lived in Asheville. He worked in construction, had been married twice, raised 3 children. No criminal history. No record of violence. Detectives visited him on February 19. Harris confirmed he had hiked in the park in October 1991, though exact dates escaped him. Yes, he'd injured his arm. A fall on sharp rock. He denied meeting any women or witnessing anything unusual. His wife supported his account, saying he returned home each night and never disappeared after dark. Harris agreed to a DNA test without hesitation. The results cleared him. His genetic profile did not match the only biological trace recovered, a microscopic fragment of male skin embedded deep in the rope fibers. That DNA belonged to someone still unknown, absent from every database. By March 2024, the investigation slowed once more. Collins reviewed another 46 names from the suspect list, re-interviewed witnesses, and sifted through aging files. Nothing shifted. The killer remained buried in time. Only one image persisted, the unidentified man in camouflage. Collins began reconstructing his movements. If the Rogerses encountered him around 1 p.m. heading downhill, then the crime likely occurred between 9 a.m. and noon. 3 hours. Enough time to meet Emily, overpower her, kill her, and remove her from the trail. But the logistics raised troubling questions. The tree stood more than 4 miles from Ramsey Cascades, across rough terrain. Transporting a body through dense forest, navigating an abandoned fire road, and lifting it into a tree required strength, equipment, and planning. Either the killer had access to a vehicle nearby, or he concealed the body temporarily and returned later. Weather reports from October 7 and 8, 1990, showed a clear night, temperatures near 40 degrees. Moonlight would have been sufficient to move without artificial light. Darkness could have offered cover. Another possibility emerged. He may not have acted alone. 2 people could have carried the body more easily, raised it higher, secured it faster. But that theory widened the search and fractured what little clarity remained. In April, Collins consulted the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit. Dr. Martin Lawrence reviewed the files and constructed a psychological profile. In his assessment, the killer was likely a man between 25 and 45 at the time of the crime. Physically capable. Comfortable in the wilderness. Someone accustomed to ropes, tools, and isolation, a hunter, a ranger, a forester, perhaps military trained. Someone who knew how to move unseen. And someone who understood exactly what it meant to leave a human life hanging between earth and sky, waiting decades to be found. He understood the terrain intimately, someone who either lived nearby or returned to the park again and again. Suspending the body high in a tree revealed more than violence, it spoke of exhibition and command, of ritual layered onto murder. The intent was not concealment. The victim was meant to remain there, visible in spirit even if unseen by human eyes. Dr. Lawrence believed this kind of behavior was rarely a single act. Crimes like this tend to echo. He advised investigators to review disappearances of women across nearby states and national parks between 1985 and 2005. At Collins's request, the National Park Service compiled a list. 18 women had vanished in the Appalachian region during that span. 6 were eventually found dead, each under different circumstances: falls, drownings, animal attacks. 12 were never located. One case stood out: Sarah Thompson, a 30-year-old teacher who disappeared in Shenandoah National Park in 1993. She was last seen on Old Rag Mountain Trail. The search failed. The file was closed. Collins contacted detectives in Virginia. They found no direct link between Sarah Thompson and Emily Carter, but agreed the similarities warranted another look. In June 2024, rangers deployed drones over the forests surrounding Old Rag. The landscape yielded nothing. No trace. No answers. By September 2024, Emily Carter's case remained unresolved. Collins continued to work it quietly, in the margins of her official duties, but other investigations demanded her time. If Emily's killer was still alive, he remained free. Ranger Marcus Jenkins no longer patrolled the park's northern reaches. He requested a transfer. He told colleagues that he could no longer pass that section of forest without unease. Each time he drove beneath the towering chestnut oaks, his eyes were drawn upward, half expecting to see a shape swaying in the wind. The tree where Emily was found still stands. The Park Service chose not to remove it. It remains a living part of the forest. But hidden among the branches, a surveillance camera was installed, quiet, watchful. Over 8 months, it recorded only wildlife: deer, squirrels, a solitary bear. Emily Carter's story later appeared in Missing 411, a series examining unexplained disappearances in national parks. Author David Paulides highlighted one chilling detail: the body had been displayed like a scarecrow, as if meant to become a permanent fixture of the wilderness. A deliberate monument. Online communities seized on the mystery. One popular theory suggested the killer was a hermit, someone living deep in the forest, cut off from society. Such figures, sometimes called wild people, are said to survive in caves or abandoned structures, hunting and foraging, often unstable. A chance encounter, some believed, could have turned fatal. Detective Collins dismissed the idea. A recluse would not likely possess professional climbing gear. The knots used to secure Emily's body were precise, technical. This was not improvisation. It was practiced skill. Another theory pointed inward, to the park itself. A ranger. Or a former one. Someone with knowledge of hidden roads, access to equipment, and training in rope systems. Ray Dawson, dismissed years earlier, still hovered on the edge of suspicion. But suspicion alone was not enough. The final possibility was the most unsettling: a random predator. A tourist who crossed Emily's path by chance, committed the crime, then vanished, into another state, another life. Perhaps he is dead. Perhaps he continued elsewhere. After 33 years, finding him may be impossible. Detective Mark Holloway, who led the original investigation in 1991, died in October 2024 without learning the truth. At his funeral, Detective Collins placed Emily's photograph on his coffin and whispered, "We're still looking. I promise." Emily Carter was laid to rest in Chicago beside her parents in November 2023. Her headstone reads, Emily Carter, 1964 to 1990. Beloved daughter. Home at last. The case remains open. Anyone with information about a man wearing a camouflage jacket who was on the Ramsey Cascades Trail on October 7, 1990, is urged to contact the Sevier County Police Department hotline. Each October, as autumn settles over the Smokies, rangers remind hikers of the rules: never walk remote trails alone. Share your route. Carry a way to call for help. The park is breathtaking, but it is unforgiving. And every year, when the leaves turn gold and fall, one ranger slows near an old chestnut oak in the northern forest, lifts their eyes to the branches, and looks carefully. Just in case. Because if someone once chose that tree, they may choose another.